So it should probably come as a surprise to no one that a car is the most likely kind of machined object or machine in general that would kill you. You're more likely to die in an automotive accident, either as a driver, as a passenger, than pretty much anything. Dying in a plane crash, and more than being shot, more likely than having a TV fall on you, more likely than like just about any other thing. And that's partially due to volume. Simply, we spend so much time in our cars, and then other people spend so much time in their cars that you just, like, accidents happen, fall asleep at the wheel, distracted driving, all that stuff. Like, you're more likely to die in an automotive accident than pretty much any other way that you could possibly die. But there's actually data in there from the CDC, from the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, and from the Department of Transportation, where they track the types of cars that are involved in accidents, how often that is, and it's given us a window into actually the individual car that's most likely to end your life. Now, before I give away what that actually is, you can make some assumptions about what that car might actually be like. For instance, cars that have, like, that are rear-wheel drive tend to have more of a handling issue in slippery or unpredictable, snowy, any of those kind of conditions, and so obviously they're going to have more accidents in, let's say, the wintertime than front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicles would. An SUV, a large SUV like a Tahoe or like a Suburban, like an Expedition, an Hummer H2, they're very high, and so they have a high center of gravity, so they're more likely to roll in an impact. And that tends to be one of those things that causes a lot of automotive deaths. So then you have, like, so maybe it's a big one. Or you could say cars there's just a lot of units sold, like a Camry, like a Prius, like a Mustang, like a any of those, like that they're really popular, so a lot of people have them, and a lot of people, because there's, first, just simple lottery statistics, right? The more of them that are out there, the more likely one is to have an accident, as well as the more likely that there's going to be different kinds of drivers, different skill levels, different attendance levels while they're driving, and so you're like, right? So you could say something like that. But the easiest assumption you can make about any of these vehicles, the number one, would be any of these really high performance cars. Let's say like the luxury sports cars and hyper cars and things, because they're fast and because they have a lot of horsepower, because almost all of them are rear wheel drive, which ticks several of the boxes we've talked about before, slippery and when wet and things. And so someone's going too fast in unfavorable driving conditions, they're as well as, like, it's been shown, like, the people that have higher performance cars, higher price tag cars, they tend to drive a little more recklessly, impatiently, making lane changes unexpectedly, and so all those things tend to result in accidents. Another thing about high-end sports cars and things is that they tend to not go through crash testing. Not because, simply that when you have $1 million car, you don't want to take 10 of them and ram them into a hard surface to see what's going to happen to somebody inside. That's just very, very expensive. So, like, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Pagani, and Koenigsegg, those things, like, they don't, and one of the reasons that they don't is that there's not a lot of them. You have to have a certain volume of sales or projected sales before you have to have crash test ratings. So they just kind of skirt around that. So another thing about them is that they tend to have all fiberglass bodies, which are less flexible in an impact. So instead of having crinkle zones, aluminum frames, or aluminum body panels, things like that, they are designed specifically to give in an impact, to take energy away from the driver. A full fiberglass monocoque chassis is not going to have that kind of flexibility, that ability to kind of give in an impact, and so more of that energy is going to go to your driver, your passenger. So all those things, like that's what you're going to give it as well. We could say it's all those classic cars that are out there, the 60s muscle cars, the 50s iron coffin cars and stuff that are out there, that they're all metal and they only have lap belts, maybe they have no seat belt at all, they have no airbags. Those ones would probably be pretty well likely to kill you, right? Well, let me tell what's interesting about this. According to DOT NHTSA data, the car that is most likely to take your life in an accident, both in the likelihood that you would have an accident in it and the likelihood that it would take your life in that accident, is one of these guys. If you can't tell, this is a Corvette C6 race car, or a C7 race car. And why a Corvette? Even at first, it ticks a lot of those boxes we were talking about. It's rear-wheel drive, slippery when wet. It has a high-performance vehicle, a lot of horsepower, can get out of control easily if you're not paying attention. That it tends to be a lot, there's a lot of them out there. It's one of the most popular models since its debut. Like, there's a lot of them out there. And interestingly, it's also kind of a collector car. That a Corvette, which any model year, but the C6 has a lot of horsepower beyond its price tag range, that it competes against Porsche 911s and Lamborghini Huracans on a regular basis. So as a result, it tends to result in a lot of accidents, or at least people that are driving it get in a lot of accidents, I guess. That one of the key aspects of its marketing kind of strategy is that it's supposed to be very attainable. That when someone makes their first $1 million, or they make their first $100,000, or they make it through, or they pay off their small business loan, or they retire early, one of the main things of the American dream is to go out and get yourself a bright red or a bright yellow Targa top Corvette to drive around with your golf clubs. And as a result, people don't give it the respect it deserves, I guess you could say. That they just think, that they think that they can take their lifetime of driving Lincolns and Priuses and Chevy Tahoes into driving this 500, 600, 700 horsepower, potentially, depending on the package you get, sports car, luxury grand sports car, and it'll be the same. And that's simply not the case. That it's a lot faster, it accelerates more quickly, it takes longer to decelerate, things like snap oversteer, and just all kinds of different circumstances about driving a car like this that just don't transfer well from other price categories or marketing categories of vehicle. But that accessibility gives people the illusion, because it, the starting of the C8 Corvette that just released last year, the bottom, the basement price point for it is $56,000, even though it has a performance category of, where it performs against cars that are twice, maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 times that price limit. So people find it like, well, I'll just buy that instead of, let's say, a Porsche 911 or something like that. That actually, when you buy one, they actually tell you to get special or like advanced driving technique skill courses. And so as a result, someone's driving, they take their eyes off the road for a minute, and they don't realize that they're coming up too close on somebody, or they're tailgating too much, or they go to change lanes really fast, and they lose control of the car, or they underestimate a curve, or like so forth, and then they wrap it around a tree. So the Corvette is the most likely car to end your life, if you have one. Or obviously, if you don't have one, then that's not going to happen. But the reason I bring all of that up, the reason I'm talking about this, is that is honestly the relationship a lot of people have with Christianity. See, part of Christian doctrine is that it's accessible. Anybody can become a Christian. That literally, I mean, you could go from, like, you can get out of, like, a large number of people actually give their lives to Christ in prison because they did unspeakable things to get arrested, and then while they're in there, they have time on their hands, obviously, and time to think about what they have done, and it gives them regret, and it gives them all kinds of things. And so as a result, the chaplain there, like, plenty of opportunities to lead people to Christ, because anyone can come to Christ regardless of your past, whether you're the guy who's crucified on the side of Christ, a thief and a murderer, or Paul, who is a murderer, like literally a terrorist, or Peter, who's just an idiot and a racist, or Matthew, who is a traitor to his people and kind of shady businessman, or like, there's anyone can come to Christ. Augustine, who in his famous Confessions, like, just incredibly depraved sexual deviant prior to his conversion to Christianity. Like, anyone can come to Christ. But because anyone can, they don't take the time to learn about the nuance and the complexity and the challenges that come from being a Christian. And so they take it for granted that they'll be able to take whatever meager understanding of that they brought into it, and they'll be able to just pilot their Christian life with no adjustments to behavior or to character. And so they have no idea the collision that's coming to them from their lack of understanding of what Christianity actually is. And that's why Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 through 28 is so critical. That, like, didn't we, Lord, didn't we cast out demons, and didn't we heal people and do many miracles in your name? And Jesus will tell them, depart from me, I never knew you, you who act as if I never even gave you a law to begin with. And they're gonna, like, they're stunned, but by then it's already too late. There's a lot of people who think that they have a Christian life, that they simply don't have one, because they took the ease of access to Christianity and Christian content and to Christian literature and to Christian doctrine. Like, they took all those things, Christian churches, they took that stuff for granted, thinking that just by being close to it, that they were saved, that they were actually in the club, I guess you could say. That they confused all those external aspects with actual faith, and that's simply not the case.